anything when like it's if you're like having an emergency going on, like some important shit's happening, the house is burning, you're going to the hospital, whatever, and then you got a really good strong reason to say, "Oh, I'm so sorry, my house was on fire. That's the hospital. I was in a car accident, had a heart attack, whatever." I just straight up said I was doing nothing. I was literally.
I was
Mm.
sleeping. I was watching videos.
No, I wasn't even sleeping.
Tyler,
I wasn't even.
there's one word called "it's not meant to be."
I really don't think that. So
No, but
Definitely
that's
not
not
true.
gonna work for
You'll
the
get an
people he had to
update. You'll
respond to.
get an
He
update,
has
Need
to
Tyler.
give
Don't
them
worry.
timing.
some
yeah,
kind of explanation, and that's not good because what is he going to say?
yeah.
No, there's nothing
I just said. I just responded. I said, "Listen, I have no excuse because I was doing exactly nothing during this time."
exactly. It happens. It just happened.
Anyhow,
What
That's
happened,
big
guys? I'm so
accountability right
lost. I
there.
have no idea what you guys are talking about. What happened?
Yeah, absolutely nothing happened, Neda.
Nothing happened. Tyler was
nothing
not
happened.
doing
Wow,
anything.
you
That's
guys
the
are
Yes.
like
problem.
Ponza.
That's exactly what happened. Nothing.
Exactly what
Yeah,
happened. Nothing
that's
happened.
crazy.
All right.
But good afternoon, everyone.
Besides, Asif, did you send me a link about the Oxford Energy?
No, I'll look for it. I was enjoying the laughter at
Okay.
your expense, but
Okay.
I will look for it now.
All right. At least we got a couple yucks out of it. All right. Here we go. Anybody want to go first to warm us up a little bit? Carl's back in the room, thank God. And let's see here.
Yeah,
Tyler, I
I
would just
I
a
can
quick
go.
announcement for you
Ken,
that Apple got nominated for its first Oscar award. Apple,
yeah,
as a movie production,
yeah.
so they got their first Oscar nomination for Best Picture
Oscar.
yesterday. So
Oh,
so I told you, I've been telling you guys, take them seriously in terms of films and TV, and they're spending a lot of money. They're building a massive studio in Playa Vista. Tyler knows where that is in L.A., and they're gonna try to catch up with at least Amazon. I mean,
wait.
they're spending money. Yeah.
Oh, wait. They bought a studio in Playa Vista, or they built a
They're
studio.
building it. They're building it. It's not even done yet.
Wow,
Yeah.
that's big game right there.
okay. So here's
Um,
But
something cool.
doesn't
I've got something funny. I've got an
Hold
article that's kind
on.
of funny.
Well, let's finish Ken's because it's his is
Cool.
actually quite important. It says Apple TV Plus, which is kind of their version of Netflix, and Apple Original Films has its best outing at the Oscars so far with 6 total nominations for Oscars, including notably Coda nabbed the most prestigious Best Picture Oscar nomination. Incidentally, Coda is also the first movie with a predominantly deaf cast to land a Best Picture nomination. Last year, Apple got its first ever Academy Award nominations for the 2021 Oscars. Having only launched Apple Plus that year, the total count of nominations has grown from 2 to 6 compared to last year, in line with expectations of Apple's original film slate. This year is also notable in that the awards Apple did receive were all in the top categories in terms of industry status. Apple will naturally be very pleased to get a Best Oscar nomination for Apple TV Plus. In just its second year of eligibility, it acquired Coda out of Sundance 2021 in a record-setting $25 million deal. In addition to Best Picture, somebody's
One
performance.
of the actors got nominated. I know. I think one of the male actors got
Yeah,
nominated for Best Actor. He's the first deaf actor to ever be nominated. Also, I believe.
Best Supporting Actor nomination, and the first time a deaf male actor has gotten an Oscar nomination. Screenwriter and director was also recognized for Best Adapted Screenplay. There you go. So,
And I should also point out with that, by the way, Paramount and Sony, two more historic studios, didn't get any nominations. So the world's changing. But I would say this though, all of these award shows, whether it's the Oscars or the Grammys or any of them, Tonys, they're all becoming less important because the ratings. People stop watching the shows on TV. The ratings have been declining for years, and their relevancy. Who knows if they'll have any relevancy in 5 years, but.
yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Hold on.
Oh, are
Yeah,
we
let's.
moving on to the
I
main?
want to. Well, the interesting topic the interesting conversation to be had on this topic is this is traditionally the role of a major Hollywood studio, right? That they get these Oscar nominations, and they made these films, and you used to pay the studio's money via movie studio ticket box offices, and now you're paying the money to Apple, and Apple's financing the films themselves directly, and they are both the film studio, for lack of a better word, and also the distributor, for lack of a better. They're the theater and digital theater streaming, and the yeah the big producer behind the film, not producer, but what's the word I'm looking for? Distributor, yeah, like the
Yeah,
studio.
distributor. Yeah, studio.
So
But
it's
I sent you an Economist article on TNATW on Twitter. So, and it's basically saying what you're saying as well. So I don't know if you want to look at that.
And there's one other thing. Remember, you used to have to go see the film somewhere. So the replacement for the cinema, for the theater, is now your cable or satellite company. Because that means because you have to think about that too. Because there was always a distributor that got the film into the theater, okay, and then there was the theater, and now there's not. Now people are not going to the theater. So who's taking the place of the theater but your cable or satellite company?
That's a great point. Well, and true, and but partially Apple's replacing the theater in some
My
sense.
the
Well,
question
no, no,
is
no,
though,
well, no, 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 because as a
Ken,
distributor, so let me describe what a distributor is. A distributor is the studios have always been they've always had their own distribution arms. Okay, sometimes they call them something else. Like Disney's got Buena Vista that distributes a lot of their films. It's a captive distribution arm. Okay, so they're the ones who got the films when there was a physical film, right? When it used to be physical film, they'd get the physical print to the theater, and now it's obviously digital, even if it's in the theater. But they're responsible for getting the picture into the theater. Okay, but at the end of the day, without your cable and satellite company, you couldn't watch Apple or Netflix or Amazon or any of it. So there is another party there. That's all.
I wanted to add to that though, which is I don't know whether it's about the distribution, but what does the box office mean, right? Because I don't know whether Apple are disclosing their numbers from box office, and the only way we can really tell about this, like their grandeur of cinema, basically, is by what they disclose or what they choose to disclose, as well as these
Exactly,
Oscars.
and that's a
Yeah.
different, and that's a whole other issue. There's lawsuits over that because a lot of actors have contracts that give them bonuses or you pay them a lot of money depending on how the box office does. So, I didn't want to get into this because I don't really think it's a tech issue. I think it's an entertainment issue. So, Tyler, cut me off whenever you want. Um, but
Can I
Scarlett
just quickly
Johansson,
say something? Just
what?
literally 2 seconds. I've got a meeting, so I've got to go, Tyler. But I'll listen in where I can. But DM'd you the article in
Okay,
Sky News.
okay, yeah, I have the article right here. In fact, Cal Patel sent it to me from BBC. That major breakthrough on nuclear fusion energy. And but we're not going to jump. We're going to jump into that one in a second, right after we get through this whole Apple, Amazon, how Apple and Amazon and others are taking over. Becoming big power players of Hollywood. You were
But
you were
to
saying,
the point, yeah. So Scarlett Johansson sued Marvel,
right,
which is Disney's subsidiary,
because they went digital.
because
Yeah,
they had moved the Black Widow film
right.
from because of the pandemic from the box office to the streamer. They ended up settling that out. There is another lawsuit that just got filed, by the way, in the last 48 hours, where Village Roadshow, which Warner Brothers for like a quarter of a century on their films, and they're entitled to not only their share, they're also entitled to, according to them, their rights and characters and all of that. They are suing over The Matrix, which obviously has had a bunch of sequels, and they're saying that Warner Brothers, hurt their business because they moved the Matrix from the theater into streaming, and then that lawsuit just came out in the last 48 hours. But that's really not a tech issue. That's I just view that as
Yeah.
entertainment stuff.
that's a bunch of entertainment stuff, but it is also a tech issue, right? Within Scarlett Johansson and wanting to know the box office numbers and having them pumped up because she's basically a AAA actor, right? But at the same time, we don't know necessarily the streaming numbers, and they had to disclose that just for her benefit, just as well, right? So I see the tech issue within it, and
That
you're
no
right.
no but no. In that particular case, it was different because they
How was it
charged
different?
an extra. No. I'll explain why that was different.
Okay.
In the Black Widow case, as in a few films that Disney's done, they have actually charged extra for watching that film. So they did disclose that because there was like a $30 fee to watch like Black Widow, and there's like two or three other films that did like that. But generally, there's not a separate fee to watch a particular film,
Yeah.
on a streamer. So that was a unique situation, and
Okay.
also they disclosed it because they were carrying out their little skirmish in public. So they were putting things in filings that in court filings you normally would never see. But generally, the streamers are not really required to disclose anything. Okay, it's not like the box office days, so they disclose what they want to disclose.
Okay. Okay. We'll go back to the energy one here for a second. European scientists say they have made a major breakthrough in their quest to develop practical nuclear fusion, the energy process that powers the stars, of which the sun is one of billions. The UK-based JET laboratory, JET, has smashed its own world record for the amount of energy it can extract by squeezing together two forms of hydrogen. If nuclear fusion can be successfully recreated on Earth, without blowing us to bits, that's the real challenge, by the way. If it can be recreated on Earth, it holds out the potential of virtually unlimited supplies of low carbon, low radiation energy, practically zero carbon, honestly. The experiments produced 59 megajoules of energy over 5 seconds. That's 11 megawatts of power. That's about half the size of a gigafactory in 5 seconds. That's tremendous. That's a tremendous amount of energy. This is more than double what was achieved in a similar test in 97. It's not a massive energy output, meaning not enough to power a whole country, by example, but only enough to boil about 60 kettles worth of water. But the significance is that it validates design choices that have been made for an even bigger fusion reactor now being constructed in France. The JET experiments put us a step closer to fusion power, said the head of the operations of the lab. We've demonstrated that we can create a mini star inside our machine and hold it there for 5 seconds and get high performance, which really takes us to a new realm. And then there's a really interesting illustration where it shows hydrogen atoms being heated, and then the fusion reaction between deuterium and tritium forming helium and a neutron, which heats up the water, which creates steam, which turns a turbine and makes energy. So they're going to build a much bigger version of this thing, this jet reactor, made from beryllium and tungsten, and it looks like the most sci-fi thing you have ever seen. And that looks straight out of a crazy sci-fi movie. Yeah, let's hope it happens. I mean, we should all be praying to God that this works, because more than anything happening on the planet today, if it's a huge if, but if it works in a bigger scale, this could save our dumbasses from the climate apocalypse. And I hate to encourage anyone from thinking you cannot assume that this is going to work. You should in no way delay all of your efforts toward reducing CO2 and with any hope that this works, because the odds of this working are incredibly low. So, but if it works, oh sweet Jesus, we will essentially energy the impact that would have on Earth, and specifically humans. It wouldn't have that much impact on animals, but other than lowering the CO2 level, but it would lower the cost of energy practically down to zero. And unlimited free energy would have implications that are hard to even imagine at this point. absolutely game changing. Yes, Ben.
Also, it will decrease the carbon dioxide emission.
No, fusion would relatively have an incredible. It's like nuclear power, it has very, very low CO2 emission.
I mean, if we shift to this kind of energy, the carbon emission from other forms of energy would be reduced.
Oh, right, of course, yeah, we would. Yeah, that's the whole point. That's why I'm saying it would help us avoid the iceberg that we find ourselves on the collision course with, with the climate change apocalypse on the horizon. This would essentially provide CO2 carbon neutral free energy, so you wouldn't need to bother with fossil fuels of any kind, essentially. Ben?
Can I ask a question that I don't know whether it's stupid or not? But what does this mean for general batteries, right? The batteries that we need to charge
It's
our
huge.
cars and all of those things.
It's quite big for batteries.
All right.
It's quite a net positive for batteries generally, because it would still make sense to store energy. Um, it yeah. Well, I mean, if you consider that
Yeah, indirectly, it's good for batteries, right?
yeah,
Because when you consider batteries as a technology, you've got to consider the charging cost, which is non-negligible.
right. But
So if energy costs drop, then it makes a big difference in that respect.
there's another way to think of it is gasoline is a form of stored energy, like a battery, that you ignite in small amounts and burn in similar ways that a battery discharges and provides energy. So does a gallon of gasoline, and so in that sense, if we have cheap energy that we could then store in battery, it would reduce the dependency of gasolines and other forms of carbon-based storages of energy.
Coal.
Right,
Yeah,
coal. Yeah,
coal and gasoline are just basically delayed solar power.
right,
It's sun energy that was trapped a long time ago, and now we're just untrapping too quickly. The
right.
other thing that's really interesting about the potential of future energy sources is that, from memory, fusion is only approximately 9% efficient in terms of converting matter to energy. So it just shows how much further we've got to go. I mean, it's hugely more efficient than anything that's come before, which is
Right.
why a tiny amount of fuel can lead to a huge amount of energy. But you can actually do at least 10, and I think it might be more than 10 times better with antimatter matter annihilation. And that's perfect energy matter conversion. But the thing is that at the moment I don't think we're anywhere near that on any scales. But it's just cool to know that not only is this if it comes true, is not only is it a massive breakthrough, but there is even another order of magnitude further than that is conceptually at least possible. So bright future for energy, hope.
But I just like to add to this because I think every time we do see some hope in specifically energy, we need to be sure to take a step back and understand that our role as parasites on the planet is goes beyond our problems go beyond just resolving the energy issue. There's a biodiversity collapse. There's a whole bunch of issues that aren't specifically tied to that. But I think that this is hopeful, absolutely. But yeah, the whole battery thing, there's a bunch of challenges we have, and it's just from a scoping perspective of how big this problem is that we all have on this little blue marble. This is hopeful, but we've got other big things cooking in terms of biodiversity collapse and things like that.
Give me 2 seconds while okay, so and there's multiple people working on this, and there is a big European joint effort within the French one has been in the works for a very long time. It's an incredible investment, but there continues to be, just like we see continued progress on social commerce, and we continue to see progress on vertical takeoff and landing vehicles and additional, there's a process, and these things have timelines, and there's investors put money in, and the more money goes in, oftentimes that accelerates, the amount that the chance of things moving in the right direction. Is kind of like fuel on the fire, is an often metaphor, putting the gas pedal down. There's tons of metaphor, wind in the sails, whatever metaphor you want to use, but nonetheless, these positive results in these labs will result in more funding and more momentum. And I got to say, the amount of progress that's being made on these, because China's doing this as well, several countries. Korea is doing one as well. They're all claiming to be making progress on this. The amazing thing is, what happens if one country achieves it first? And would a country, if it does achieve it first, use that as an asymmetrical advantage, or would they feel like, you know what, this is bigger than a country, this is a global humanitarian thing, and we should share this globally, and do in the sense, in Elon Muskish, like intellectual property charity for the world or for humanity. That to me is a really interesting question.
I think it
Uh,
depends on the country, right?
yeah,
I
before
think I'm expecting it to be the former and not the latter. Just historically, we've never placed humanity before profit or self indulgencies. So I assume that they'll monetize it, which will definitely be in our worst interest and wouldn't help us globally. But yeah, it'd be nice to see them place humanity first and sort of share that, whoever's the first to move, with the world.
so check this
That
out.
And
being
Elon Musk
said,
also have
there
his
was
future plans of the energy in different directions, and I'm really hopeful that he will achieve that. And my question is, what is the fusion reactor made up of? Because that is going to determine how large on the scale we can build it and the supply of that material.
Beryllium. Go ahead, Demo.
Beryllium.
yeah. Oh yeah, like I've been watching the sustainability sector for quite a minute now, and wasn't that what COP26 was also about as well when it comes to building at least relations, as much as when you read the notes and all of these things, you don't know what necessarily to glean, and you have to be quite a professional to seek out the right information, right, and delineate the right things. However, there are links to, or should I say, there can be a straight line built between them building new technologies and those safe or clean up learning fuels or energies being able to be used for, in quotes, global good, right? We all say that, but in reality there's never really been a global good. But for the sake of the conversation, that is one of those assets, right? The COP26 and all of the other things, like, even though I believe Putin said he wasn't going to come to it, but in other news, it's most countries are being more open with that type of sector.
Right. So I have a Swedish family staying with me at the moment, and they made a really interesting point in a conversation yesterday, which we were talking about COVID in the Nordics and how the Nordics are now all deciding, in fact, today, Wednesday, February 9th, to remove, Sweden officially is removing all COVID regulations, essentially. Like, we're going back to life pre COVID, essentially. And the point that was made, however, was that interesting that the Nordics are all kind of doing this around the same time. However, that's not the interesting bit. The really interesting bit, and I wish there, if you are a Scandinavian in the audience, please jump up on stage. And there's, shockingly, we used to be way overwhelmed with the amount of Scandinavian folks and tech news around the world for, in the early days. And Johan has kind of been filling in a bit of that role. But what was shocking was there was, the Scandinavians like to think of themselves as cousins or even brothers or sisters, and they always are questioning the relationship between them and how friendly or adversarial they are. They're constantly teasing each other and joking with each other, but they like to think that they've got each other's backs. But what was really very revealing is during COVID, they didn't give a shit about each other. They kind of turned against each other a little bit, and not in a strong way, but they were certainly not collaborative in any kind of way. And I think that has caught the Swedes a little bit off guard, at least. Ellen, who joins us from Norway very regularly, I'd love to hear her reflection on this as a Norwegian, or if we have any Danish friends in the audience or Finnish friends in the audience, who, by the way, I love all those people. And I mean, nothing negative here. It was just it's not what I would have assumed going into COVID. I would have thought there would have been a lot more natural proclivity towards collaboration and because that's the tendency generally in the Nordics is to collaborate, and there was a clear lack of that, and the opposite of whatever that is. There was a resistance towards collaboration, shockingly, that has now become apparent that the Scandinavians now have to come to terms with. That, you know what, all of this talk about being quote unquote Scandinavians, essentially, does that mean nothing at all? So anyway, just a reflection.
Yeah, one of the things you should be aware that the COVID was the first time this shown. What has shown lately during we have some kind of shortage of electricity in the Nordic countries. Now they are nitbickering in between Denmark and Sweden and Finland over electricity, and it's the same hard feelings.
Hmm.
And that's very, very interesting as a Swede to see. And
Yeah.
as you say, Sweden and Norway and Denmark, we have stood united during forest fires, floodings, and other disasters and so on. So when this pandemic hit us, and the Norwegians closed our borders immediately to us because we were one of the reddest countries on the planet regarding the wildfire spread in the beginning. And if you look at the graphs today, the first wave that made everybody turn the spikes outwards is nothing what we are doing right now. We have 250,000 new cases in a country of 8.5 million each week. So yeah, the thing is that it become a lot colder in the Nordics,
Yeah.
not only climate wise.
Thanks for the cultural context, Johan. So I
Hey,
wanted to.
hey, Tyler, I just want to correct one thing that's being said about like there's never been a situation that they're rare where people have put the humanity over profit. You know, Jonas Salk, who you know from San
Yeah,
Diego,
yeah,
he
yeah.
did not patent the polio
Amen.
vaccine. He opted not
Amen,
to.
amen to that. That matter of fact, that's a great example of a clap right there. That's the polio vaccine that Ken's referring to, and Jonas Salk and the Salk Institute. By the way, this is worth mentioning. The Salk Institute is located in La Jolla, across the street from UC San Diego, University of California, San Diego, where I went to university. And you can walk across the street, and I have to, the Jonas Salk Institute architecturally, which was done by Mr. Kahn, was Steve Jobs' favorite architect. And if you ever visit the location, you'll know why. It's architecturally stunning and mesmerizing, and even, I dare say, yeah, mesmerizing and border. There's a feeling of divinity when in there. It's amazing. And Steve, you know, the Apple stores. You can see how the Apple stores are in some ways an homage to the Salk Institute architecturally. Anyway, it's totally worth seeing if you happen to ever be in San Diego. Go by the Salk Institute, and it still looks like it's from the future. And it's some of the most important work, you know, goes on there of all kinds. By the way, the Panda who's working on reversing aging is happening there at the Salk Institute at the moment. Dr. Fran? No? Okay. So let's talk.
Accidental.
Yeah. But just a shout out to Jonas Salk, who didn't try to monetize polio and, you know, realized the humanitarian the thing there. God bless him. The top story today, Wednesday, February 9th, is from the Washington Post. Here we go. That the U.S. Department of Justice has arrested two people in New York and seized $3.6 billion worth of Bitcoin allegedly stolen in a 2016 hack. And they're calling it the largest financial seizure ever. The Justice Department announced today it had seized $3.6 billion in Bitcoin allegedly stolen. This from Bitfinex in a 2016 hack, saying authorities have also arrested the husband and wife in New York for allegedly trying to launder the cryptocurrency fortune, because that's the hard part. Well,
Yeah.
the additional challenge
She's
is
apparently a rapper and writer for Forbes as well.
officials said tech entrepreneur Ilya Lichtenstein, 34 years old, and his rapper wife, Heather Morgan, 31 years old, were charged with conspiring to launder money. They were accused of trying to launder 100 and nearly 120,000 bitcoins that were stolen after a hacker breached the cryptocurrency exchange Bitfinex and initiated more than 2,000 unauthorized transactions. Prosecutors said the Bitcoin was sent to a digital wallet controlled by Liechtenstein. At the time of the theft, the amount of Bitcoin was worth about 71 million, but now cryptocurrency has appreciated so much in the years that the total value is now around 4.5 billion. Federal officials said that they were able to seize about 94,000 of them of the stolen Bitcoin, which was estimated value of 3.6 billion. So there's still another billion out there, essentially. The case marks the largest single seizure of funds in the history, officials said, and is the most high-profile prosecution to emerge from the agency's newly announced effort to investigate crimes involving cryptocurrency. Quote, cryptocurrency is not a safe haven for criminals. Deputy Attorney said in a written statement that accused Liechtenstein and Morgan of trying to launder the stolen Bitcoin through a labyrinth of cryptocurrency transactions. Quote, thanks to the meticulous work of law enforcement, the department once again showed how it can and will follow the money no matter the form it takes. Bitfinex had previously offered a reward, potentially worth hundreds of millions of dollars, for information leading to the return of the stolen funds. U.S. officials would not say if that reward offer played a role in the government's case against Liechtenstein and Morgan, but the court papers suggest that the government may not have needed help. According to the papers, much of the stolen Bitcoin was placed for a time in accounts at Alphabay, a platform shut down by authorities in 2017 as an illicit marketplace for drugs, firearms, and fake documents. Prosecutors said that they were able to trace Bitcoin from the hack through Alphabay accounts, and beyond court documents do not accuse Liechtenstein and Morgan of the hack itself. Officials declined to say if the pair were or are suspected of stealing the money. Liechtenstein, a tech entrepreneur who goes by the nickname Dutch and holds both U.S. and Russian citizenship, according to court papers, describes himself online as an angel investor. Morgan, according to her online profile, is a part-time rapper who also ran an email marketing company called Salesforce. Yada, yada, yada. Now, I guess the interesting question hanging in the air here is what will happen to those Bitcoins? Do they return them to Bitfinex, and does Bitfinex get that back? Or does the government say finders keepers?
Government says finders keepers. It's
What do you,
evidence. But
In the news, it said it gonna return to those who still want buy them, but it's obviously are around 25,000 difference. So not sure that part what they're gonna do with that.
But my interest is in the 1 billion that wasn't seized, and is that a treasure hunt for the Bitcoin people, or will the government find that as well?
Aren't there underlying account holders from where it got stolen, and wouldn't they try to trace it, like to trace it back to give back the individual allotments to people who had their accounts hacked,
yeah,
or not?
I would
Yeah,
assume.
Yeah,
it
that's
says so, but not sure how they try to do. Yeah, just I said 25,000 difference there.
Well, here's another thought, which is if governments like the U.S. start to get build gain traction in getting um, piles of cryptocurrencies, specifically bitcoins, right, for drug busts or all kinds of crazy, seizures of different kinds, and the government finds themselves holding hundreds of thousands of bitcoins, and the Bitcoin price of Bitcoin is going up. You see where I'm going here? That could potentially influence the government to favor Bitcoins in a weird way. I'm thinking creatively here. I'm trying to think like, I wonder how the government feels about holding all of these Bitcoins. Like, they're not going to piss away $3.6 billion. They fight, you know, other countries for sales of fighter jets for that kind of money. So, anyway.
It
I think you
depends.
get
What
into I
Tyler?
think you get
There's an
into
answer to
getting
that
it,
question.
and I think
So
the best thing to do is to return the bitcoins to those who've been robbed, but then assess a fee, and that could potentially be at the discretion of the government. That way, their efforts for gaining those bitcoins haven't gone lost, and additionally, those who are without get their funds back, and you circulate more. And I do think that there's a add value there for maybe potentially gaining more traction in that arena when they see that there's such a benefit for it. And I think that those conversations are already happening. We're bringing Fed coins, for example, back to the table as a conversation for America. So I do agree with you, Tyler.
Now, what
You
happens?
have to look at what, yeah, but Tyler, you have to look at what the government does in other seizures. It's like probably going to, for other types of assets historically. So
Yep.
when they got the money back they got a good part of the money back for the Madoff victims.
Yep.
So they returned that money to the people who had it stolen. They actually went back to people who got excess distributions, and that was not their money, and then took the money from them and gave it to other people. They weren't assessing fees on that. But I would tell you also that when they seize other types of assets, okay, other than cash, they try not to keep it. So when they have cars, they don't keep the cars; they auction them off. In one case in Southern California, I think Tyler, you know this. I think it was the bicycle club in L.A. or whatever that is, in Commerce, wherever it is. They once seized that the whole card club because it was involved in drug dealing. They didn't want to be involved in running a card club. Particularly back then, it was like gambling. So they appointed an administrator. They had to run it for a little bit, but they put that up for sale. So it really depends on whether they consider the Bitcoin a cash equivalent or they consider it more like an asset. If they consider it an asset and not a currency, they'll sell it off like they sell off every other asset. I think you have to look at it the way that from history.
Mhm.
What surprises me is that people who have that much Bitcoin, how are they storing the keys in such a way that it can be seized by a government?
Right.
That's the bit that doesn't make any sense to me. I mean, obviously, that's why I
In the news
used to run.
says
Yeah, what's
Ilya.
going on there?
Oh, it says
Sorry,
Ilya
what's?
uploaded the private key and uh,
Oh my
the
gosh.
file to a cloud,
Yeah,
so
it shouldn't be
it's
without
encrypted.
torturing somebody. It
Yeah,
just shouldn't be possible to get somebody's access to somebody's Bitcoin if they have even the remotely slightest clue about
Correct.
how to do security. There should be no mechanism by which the government can take it off you short of torturing you.
Right.
There's no technological mechanism if it's stored properly, but most people
Right.
don't store it properly as well. So, or
Well,
store the keys
to that
properly, should we
to
say?
that point, the article continues to say, at the federal court hearing in New York late Tuesday, yesterday, prosecutors initially sought to keep the couple behind bars while awaiting trial, but a judge ultimately ruled they could be released if they met certain conditions, including bonds of $5 million for him and $3 million for her. Both are also ordered to remain at their home in New York with ankle bracelet monitors during court arguments about the terms of the release. Prosecutors said the couple have access to $330 million worth of Bitcoin that hasn't been recovered. To your point, Ben, that part was maybe stored a little more securely. And that federal agents found what they call a bag of burner phones under the couple's bed, suggesting they could be a flight risk. And then our friend Carl found a statement from Bitfinex where they said they would work with the DOJ to try and recover the seized Bitcoin. And if successful, it would repay investors in its LEO token, which was created to try and backstop a fiscal hole created after an unrelated payments processor used Bitfinex was seized by authorities in 3 different countries, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, what happens, by the way, it says that the couple spent some of the money on gold and NFTs. What happens to, for example, if they had just gone hog wild on NFTs, right? Which you could do with $3.6 billion. You could really go bananas with some NFTs. And by the way, imagine if they had bought all of the crypto punks and in the early days with
Bored
that,
apes, yeah.
yeah, and Bored Apes. That 3.6 billion would be worth more than, I don't know, 30 billion, easily a 10x, closer to 100x. My God, they could be approaching 300 million if they had done that. Anyway, the point is, what then happens if they're holding 100 crypto punks instead of these bitcoins, for example? How would that become unraveled, for example? Um, anyway, So the government would seize the CryptoPunks, and now we've got the Department of Justice holding 100 CryptoPunks. You see what the predicament there. Okay, so the second
But
part.
So,
Tyler, my point
t-
is the government has seized in the past
Yeah,
all sorts of like
yeah,
weird assets,
yes,
and other than cash, they figure out how to auction them off. You know.
right.
yeah,
I've
but
done that.
the
I've bought shit
yeah,
at
but Kat,
government auctions. Yeah,
Donna here. So I would make and I'm sure you probably spoke about it before. I was just got off a train. Um, I think that Bitfinex and which of course and Tether have a good claim that this money should belongs to them. If that's
right,
the case,
right,
Tether is completely backed or over collateralized at this point.
right. Indeed. So, the top story of today has now changed as I refresh the page, Cheryl. And the top story is from YouTube. It's the live stream of Samsung's Galaxy Unpacked event where they're announcing the new Galaxy phones, or who gives a shit. Here's the summary so you don't have to watch the live stream. Samsung unveils a 6.1-inch Galaxy S22 and a 6.6-inch S22 Plus with updated cameras, 120 hertz refresh rate, Snapdragon 8, which is the new hot processor coming out in February 25th at $800 and $1,000 respectively. And then also a Galaxy S22 Ultra starting at $1,200 with a 6.8-inch 120 hertz display, S Pen support, 1 terabyte of storage, updated cameras. They've also unveiled a $1,100 tablet called the S8 Ultra, which is a 14.6-inch, and that's pretty much it. That's what they announced. There you go. So the next big topic is from CNBC that as Facebook, now known as Meta, dips under the $600 billion market cap, that's Jesus Christ. That's nearly half of their value in recent weeks, isn't it? It may avoid antitrust liability since it falls below the threshold set by the recent U.S. House bills as a covered platform. Facebook owner Meta closed with a market cap below 600 billion on Tuesday for the first time in May 2020, which is below the threshold for being considered. How can you be a monopoly if we just got the shit beat out of us on the publicly traded markets?
That is amazing turn of events, but I want to hear
That
what
that,
Ken
that
has to
doesn't
say.
determine Tyler. They're two different things. It's they wouldn't
No,
be subject to this bill, which is a
right.
unique bill that's never existed before. But there is no dollar threshold that excludes you from being subject to antitrust. You
Hold on.
know,
Well, it says this.
in general, from
Hold on.
enforcement
Maybe.
action.
I'm not so sure. The article says a $600 billion market cap figure also happens to be the number that the House legislators picked as the threshold for a
Right, that's a new bill. That's not even a law, Tyler. But my point is, there's existing antitrust laws that go back to the 1900s.
sure.
That's typically the antitrust law that we enforce, and
But
the
these,
FTC has
yeah,
actually brought an antitrust action
yes.
Facebook
But these
under.
are no that bill is no ordinary bill. It is specifically the bill designed
I know that, I
to
know
target
that, but
Facebook.
you're not listening.
Yeah,
I know that, and I don't disagree with what you're saying about the bill. What I'm
yeah,
saying is that that bill never existed. We have existing antitrust laws,
yeah,
and they're still subject to them. And the FTC's got an existing antitrust
yeah.
action
Yes.
against Facebook
But
under the laws of the 1900s.
right,
Okay,
but you know as well as I do that that got tossed out because the antiquated definitions in the conventional.
they filed another one. They filed another
I
one.
know,
There's a
but
second. Yeah.
you and I both know that we've been tracking this, here in this room since that whole, snowball started rolling. So, um, it's just an interesting scenario here. It could take quite some time for any of the bills to become laws. If that happens at all, the language could still be amended, and even as originally written, the bills would continue to apply to the platforms for a period of time after they fall below the market cap threshold. A Senate bill that recently passed through the judiciary community actually uses a lower market cap threshold than its House companion at 550 billion.
Hey Tyler, do you want to know how kind of stupid it is to use market cap in these bills?
I agree.
If you even if they were over a billion, whatever the number is, let's say they're still there,
Yeah,
all they would have to do is recapitalize themselves. They have no debt. They could take on a lot of debt.
yep,
Okay, the debt would basically mean that they'd have more debt. It would shrink their equity. Their stock market capitalization would go down. Okay, and all of a sudden the market cap would go down. So using market cap rather than enterprise value and enterprise value is basically your market cap plus your debt, right? But because that's how stupid the bill's worded, because they could change, any company could change its market cap if they want to lower it by just taking on a lot of debt. So it's ridiculous.
I hear you. Okay, so then that's an interesting article in and of itself. As usual, a bunch of people are tweeting, and Aaron Levy from the CEO at Box, who is quite a good person to follow on Twitter, as usual, has a very funny tweet saying Zuck is always 3 steps ahead by lowering his valuation to avoid the antitrust. Sam Altman took to Twitter to say Facebook trading at about 5x revenue really doesn't make economic sense to me. What am I missing? Yeah. Okay, next one is a profile of Sequoia's Roloff Botha, who seeded the idea of Sequoia Capital Fund, which holds stakes in companies past the traditional 10-year VC fund cycle. And we announced, many of you on stage will remember, when the Sequoia Capital Fund was announced about, what was that, 3 months ago? And the idea that it would just keep reinvesting perpetually. And by the way, this, Cheryl, can we pin this to the top of the room? Oh, you already did. Thank you very much. And so it's pinned to the top of the clubhouse room. Roloff Botha was our investor at Mahalo, our board member from Sequoia. And Roloff was one of the board members. So was Elon Musk. And the two of them are best buddies, BFFs, because they're both South African and they were both C-suite at PayPal, where Elon was CEO while Roloff was the CFO. And now you would assume that if you had a startup and Elon Musk is one of your board members, that he would be the best board member on your board. You would assume. I'm here to tell you, as somebody in the board meetings, that Roloff Botha was the superstar of the board meetings. Every board meeting we ever had, I left with deeper and endlessly more deeper appreciation, and I don't know what the word I'm looking for is, just admiration for Roloff. He's totally brilliant, absolutely brilliant, and was always the first to show up, always the last to leave, always the most helpful. I could go on and on and on. Just beyond impressive. Beyond impressive. What an incredible individual. To anyone who is fortunate enough to have Roloff on their board, it's a unique blessing and advantage. He's brilliant. He's totally brilliant. For those who don't know, Roloff was sort of the main player in the YouTube, selling to Google. The YouTube guys, Chad and Steve, were also from PayPal, and they worked. Obviously, Roloff knew them from PayPal, and then they did YouTube, and Roloff invested, he was sort of led the round, and then helped, with the big acquisition to Google, and that's why, as I've said to many people many times, when we were pivoting Mahalo, one of the pivots we did was to be the first big content producer for YouTube, because we shared the same board member, Roloff Botha, who's the gentleman in the photo above my head. And so we did. We were the first big content farm, for lack, the derogatory term. And we made, agreements with YouTube to make a lot of content that they themselves needed, because they had a lot of advertisers who wanted to advertise on YouTube. There was at that point believe it or not, no ads on YouTube, if you can imagine that concept. But they had a lot of advertisers who wanted to advertise. But to do that, there's specific content that they wanted, which at that time was specifically like cooking videos and stuff like that. So we did that. We started making hundreds and hundreds and thousands of videos for YouTube. And we were the first to be paid to make videos for YouTube. So we were the first paid YouTube content creators. And in fact, my personal YouTube account was the first account that we used to do exactly that. So I have the unique privilege to say that and remind everyone that I was the first paid YouTube content creator. And look where it's gone since then. It's been amazing to see how YouTube has managed to flourish and blossom and become an amazing content creator platform. And some might argue it's still relatively early days to see how far that train will roll. But I mention all of that to highlight the brilliance of Roloff, who he knows so much of what's going on all over the valley in every which way, and it knows the next 2, 3, 4 steps ahead that everyone's working on and where things are going, where the ball's going. That it gives all of his companies a unique advantage, and that's all I want to say. Just brilliant, totally brilliant. I dare even say, from my personal perspective, I got obviously nothing but love for Elon. But to me, the superstar in the board meetings every time goes. The VIP award goes to Roloff for every meeting we had. So just it is what it is. I'm not saying that Elon wasn't brilliant. I'm just saying Roloff was the one who leaves you kind of impressed after the fact. So anyway, Roloff both kind of a well-known in the inner circles of the valley, but relatively he keeps a very low profile. He's very humble, very low profile. But
Yeah, so
that's his personality, right?
Todd, I was gonna add actually, I'm in South Africa now, and whenever I'm in Cape Town, I often run into some people who used to go to school with him back in the day, and they, really give some very cool stories about his early days in South Africa.
Yeah.
But also, he's inspired a lot of South Africans to think big, right?
Yeah.
When you have that kind of an export as a person who goes on to work at PayPal and become a great VC, a lot of entrepreneurs in South Africa, they kind of try and they think bigger as a result. So yeah, just kind of more on the tribute to Rolla Porter.
Yep. Cool dude. Okay, next up is from Bloomberg. As crypto tokens fall, FTX, the exchange, and Crypto.com will run Super Bowl ads seeking new customers. Research shows that $113 million has been spent on crypto TV ads since 2020, and now we've got Crypto.com and FTX both running Super Bowl ads this year. That's fantastic. And that reminds me, I need to ping our good friend Rami from the Foo Fighters to see if he can hop in and answer our questions as to what to expect, because the Foos are expected to do the first VR VR Super Bowl halftime show with the Foo Fighters. And Rami, one of the Foos, happens to be one of my oldest, dearest friends, and we used to tour together. So I would love to see if he's got any insights to share as to what kind of meetings they've had internally about how they have to prepare for this Super Bowl halftime show that they're going to do. We pinged him yesterday. Believe it or not, Facebook Messenger is kind of his main jam. So I'm going to, rather than try and do Twitter DMs, because he doesn't really use Twitter, I need to ping him on Facebook Messenger, which I barely use.
He might be, Tyler, he might be busy preparing for the Super Bowl. You might want to get him on after the Super Bowl when he's got more time.
Oh, you know what? That might even be more revealing, honestly, right? Is to hear how it went, and he'll probably have more interesting insights.
Yeah, you don't want to mess up a Super Bowl presentation. I'm sure they're working full time on that. Yeah,
I'm not worried about that, but I think you're right. He'll have more interesting stuff to say after than before. I don't think he'll have anything really interesting to say before. So the next one is a deep dive into the CEO and history of Telegram, which has about 30 core employees, minimal content moderation, and until recently, no ongoing revenue. And this is a Wired deep dive profile piece on Telegram. It says hundreds of millions of users, no algorithm, no ads, courage in the face of autocracy. Sounds like a dream. Careful what you wish for. Okay. And Cheryl just shared that at the top of the clubhouse room for those that want to dive on that. The next is from The Verge. It says the WWF hyped and then canceled plans to raise money for a conservation with NFTs on Polygon's eco-friendly blockchain. A fraught claim dismissed by experts. WWF thought it picked a less polluting blockchain. Within a few days last week, the World Wildlife Fund was hyping, but then canceled plans to raise money for a conservation with NFTs on Polygon's quote-unquote eco-friendly blockchain, but then realized that that doesn't really fit with their corporate values. Next is from Bloomberg. They say they have sources that Microsoft is in talks to acquire a cybersecurity research and incident response company called Mandiant, whose stock closed up nearly 18% on Tuesday on that announcement that Microsoft might be acquiring them. And then, no doubt, Microsoft would push that out to all of their big enterprise clients. The next is a whole bunch of fundraising announcements, like Starburst, which offers a special SQL query engine, raises 250. And then what else do we have? Visa, usually the exclusive Olympics payments partner, is competing with China's e-currency during the Winter Olympics as the government tests the digital currency. For decades, the U.S. card giant Visa was the only electronic payments provider at the games. Not this time in Beijing, because China's central bank digital currency has no need for Visa. It's sort of the point of that. And that's a problem
Even
for Visa.
prior to that, Visa has no stance. They use Union Pay, remember?
Yeah, that's right. For those who don't know, in Asia, we have a third option in addition to Visa and MasterCard called Union Pay. And yeah, welcome to Asia. So the next is Twitter tells U.S. Senator Wyden that it's transitioning away from using Mito for passcodes as the text message services firm faces surveillance accusations. Twitter told the U.S. Senator that it's cutting ties with a European technology company that helped it send secretive passcodes to its users via text messages. You guys remember this when the Mito was in the news like 2 months ago? And the founder was caught doing some crazy stuff with like a little sister company and whatnot. Is this ringing any bells with folks? I remember this. Let me read the Engadget version of this. It says, Twitter has informed the U.S. Senator Ron Wyden of Oregon that it's transitioning away from using Mito out of Germany. You guys remember this? This was a crazy story 2 months ago. The company COO allegedly sold surveillance technology firms access to Mito's networks. Remember? Am I ringing any bells now? You remember this?
Yeah, I remember, yes.
Allowing
Yes.
them to track people using their mobile devices. Remember now? Those
Oh,
companies,
we're getting warmer on the memory now.
right? Those companies, in turn, contracted with government agencies. Mito told Bloomberg back then that it had no knowledge or involvement in the COO's surveillance operation and that it's launching an internal probe investigation to determine if its technology and business had been compromised. And we laughed at the time because we knew it obviously had, because the after effects were already apparent. Obviously, this has happened. The senator's aide that Bloomberg talked to said Twitter cited media reports as a major factor for its decision. So Twitter read those same articles we did 2 months ago, and now they're coming out. By the way, it's a Swiss company. Swiss tech firm Mito is an established provider of automated text messages that some big companies, by lots, especially in Asia, are using to send out their two-factor authentication codes, identical to what you have, for example, in Clubhouse, where when you switch between devices, it'll say, oh, you're trying to log into this device and we got to authenticate you. Here's a code via SMS. Just enter the code, lickety split. You all get these on multiple apps, obviously. Those apps are using a third party to provide those, like Mito, for example. And the problem with that is whoever gets those codes can get into your device and knows your location and everything else. And the COO of the company was selling that information, which is a huge problem. So Bloomberg reported in December, right? That's when we saw it. So 2 months ago, just as I said. However, that one of its co-founders operated a secret surveillance operation that helped governments locate users through their phones. Aside from Twitter, Mito's clients include a tiny little startup called Google, something like that. Everyone heard of this little startup, Google?
Is that a startup? Yeah,
There's another
I've
one
heard.
called WhatsApp. WhatsApp? What's it? WhatsApp? LinkedIn, Telegram. There's another one called TikTok, TikTok, Tencent, and Alibaba.
I'm done.
These are just these tiny little
I don't know
startups.
what them kids are doing nowadays.
Tickling talk.
No one's
These
ever heard
young
of these apps.
startup kids.
You guys have nothing to worry about because you're clearly not using any of these. So you're probably not compromised at all. So Mito has reportedly been telling. By the way, those are just like the if we listed all of them, it's like half of your phone is using this. By the way, So this is to highlight the level of the problem here. The publication says several other clients have cut ties with Mito since the report came out, though it's unclear if Google and other well-known tech companies and services that it counts as customers are also parting ways with it. Well, Google has their own alternative, which is their own Google Authenticator app, by the way, which they would much prefer that you use. And you might start seeing Google start pushing you more towards, using their own dog food rather than this third party's two-factor authentication. So
I don't know whether this is related, but just as an anecdote from what happened to me today, which is Apple automatically put another email address within my when I was signing up for a platform today, and they said keep your what I forgot the exact verbiage, but it was along the lines of keep your information private or whatever it was. And I was like, I didn't know why they did that because I don't necessarily do that, especially with business platforms that I was trying to sign up from. So I think there's more of a push to actually keep the data more private than we've ever been. But yeah.
yep. And Evan was just sending me a DM about the Apple unveiling contactless payments via tap to pay on iPhone, which is sort of their version of Square, where any merchant, which is pretty much anybody, including your local babysitter or dog walker, can now receive payments from other people paying by just touching phones via NFC, or just the payer's credit card if it's one of any modern credit card has an NFC chip in it. So you just touch the credit card to the merchant's your babysitter's phone, and bada boom, bada bing, your babysitter, your dog walker, your gardener, whoever, the lemonade stand of the kids down the street can now collect payments via credit cards. And oh shit. Carl, can you unmic in Twitter Space and count to 5, please? I just became aware of the fact that we might not have the.
Yep. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Yeah. Was there something not switched on?
Apparently. Yeah, because 2 people just pinged me to say, "Hey, can you not hear the people in Twitter?" And the answer is yes, I couldn't because the cable was not correctly seated. So, but now I can. So, was there? You had
no problem.
Something you wanted to jump in on?
No, I'd made a couple of comments earlier on, but it was mostly JT, I noticed, made a couple of longer comments, and everybody was talking over him, bless him, as if he wasn't there. So,
JT, what were you saying, my friend?
I already forgot. I'm sorry. It was something about Apple.
Really valuable.
I was trying to make a connection in the first story.
Okay.
But we can get to it because it was one of the top stories.
Jason or Jonathan or Evan. World. And was there anyone else making any other kind of brilliant, insightful gems?
Jason? I don't think so.
No.
Yeah, everything I say is brilliant and insightful. But yeah, no, I was just trying to get you JT's attention.
Okay. Thank you for getting the attention. The next one's from Bloomberg, that a Dutch company called ASML, and that's no ordinary Dutch company. That's in many ways the most interesting company on the planet at the moment that you've never heard of, unless you're a regular tech newser, and then you very much have heard of it. And Cheryl can tell you a lot about it. But suffice to say, it is the linchpin in the power dynamic of global politics at the moment. And it's because this little company, it's not so little, it's a huge company, but they develop essential chip-making machines. And let me explain before I read the headline what's going on with this critically important Dutch company. If you want to build semiconductor factories, you're going to need to use ASML's products and services. And America knows that. And China and others want to build semiconductor factories, and America knows you're not going to be able to do that without ASML. So if we can control who ASML is able to work with, and we don't allow ASML to do business with China, then China is not going to be able to figure out how to do semiconductors in any kind of meaningful way. And so now the headline says, Bloomberg says that the Dutch company ASML, which develops essential chip-making machines, says an affiliate of a Chinese company has begun marketing products that infringe on its IP. ASML Holdings has warned that an affiliate of a Chinese company it previously accused of stealing its trade secrets is now marketing those products based on its intellectual property. And that could be a problem. And by the way, this is not entirely surprising that China knows it needs what ASML has. And so if America is telling ASML, you cannot do business with China, you read my lips. Hello, Mr. ASML, we love you, sweetheart, darling baby. I love you, I love you, I love you, but you cannot do business with China. Are we clear? Yes, we are. Okay, great. Now, so here's where shit gets weird. And we even need a sound file. We have a special sound file for this kind of weirdness. All of a sudden, China somehow has what it needs from ASML without doing business with ASML. So, ASML saying, oh, they stole it. China's going to say, we didn't steal it. You sold it to us, but you're not allowed to admit that you sold it to us. And you're not allowed to do business with us, but you gave us the secret recipe and showed us how to cook that batch of cookies on our own. And we went ahead and did that, and now the shit's out of the bag. But the point is that now China's going to be able to build the semiconductor fabs that they know they need to build, which America was intentionally trying to prevent from happening. Now, one of two things happened. Either ASML, obviously the Chinese were offering them anything, billions and billions and perhaps tens, maybe even hundreds of billions of dollars for the information that they need from ASML. And ASML may or may not have agreed to do that, a kind of a backdoor deal. So that's the question that we could take a poll or whatever. Do we think that ASML took the money? Or if ASML doesn't take the money, they know, trust me, they know China's not going to take no for an answer. We had the headline yesterday, did we not? That there was, which company was it that is now 24 hours ago? We had a headline that China just stole trade secrets from a telecom company. Somebody remember which telecom company that was yesterday? Motorola, was it? So, which by the way, and then I went on the rant about Nortel out of Ottawa, Canada, where the same thing happened, and then also Ericsson in Stockholm, my backyard, where it also everyone in Stockholm knows how that happened. So China kind of has a track record of doing these things. So that's my point is ASML knows that. ASML knows if they don't sell it to China, China's going to try and take it anyways. They're not going to take no for an answer. So you can take the $100 billion and give them what they want, or they're going to take it anyways. You see where I'm going? You see where I'm going?
And they're going to Havana you.
Right. Then next thing you know, everyone's got Havana syndrome. So, what do we think actually happened here?
Can I know if I'm getting this right, please? What was said is that information was sold or stolen, and
Correct.
people are trying to figure out why the information was stolen. The
No,
government.
why the
Guessing.
transfer of IP happened? Was it? There was
Oh,
either it was done as you just said through a sale or through a steal. Either way, ASML has to say we didn't do this willingly, or there was no cooperation. So it's up to somebody's going to have to do some deep dive to figure out what the heck really happened here. Anyone have?
That it's a Chinese company. It's called XTAL. They had a case back to 2019. So ASM won the case because it said XTAL stole their IP, just like you said, and it's a Chinese company. So they are selling those tech stolen from ASML to the Chinese company. So that's why they have this technology from the ASML. That's how the news said. So basically, it's stolen from ASML. Yeah.
Well, of course they're going to say it was stolen because they're not going to admit if they had sold
Yeah,
it.
but the company selling right now is a Chinese company,
Yeah, we
and
know.
they had a cash. So
Yeah.
yeah, that. But yes, who knows the truth? But in the surface, that's how the story goes.
But the thing is, China don't care what's the truth, right? They just need the machine.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. So the next big article is called "Vicarious and Autonomous Vulnerability Remediation Service for Supply Chain Attacks Raises 24 million." TikTok continues to allow ads encouraging ADHD self-diagnosis and medication geared towards young users and likely violating its medical misinformation policy. Now, what's interesting about this article is not that TikTok's doing shady shit, as we have seen on an almost daily basis, including yesterday, similar things. What's interesting is that they're starting to get more attention for it. Like yesterday, if you guys will recall, there was an article yesterday that highlighted how TikTok is doing tons of shady stuff, but that's, again, no surprise to us. We see that very regularly here.
I like the vernacular of shady shit and twerk taxation.
Oh yeah, well yesterday, yeah, yesterday's revelation was the idea that they could tax twerking because they want. TikTok is now saying they're going to start controlling, moderating what's happening with young users. And one of the ideas that was floated was they could tax the twerking. Governments could tax you if you're twerking. So it's called the twerk tax, by the way. But the new article that Cheryl just shared at the top of the Clubhouse room, it says TikTok is enabling predatory ADHD and advertisers to target young users, which they clearly really should. A swarm of advertisements encouraging attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, ADHD, self-diagnosis and medication have appeared on TikTok in recent weeks, potentially violating the platform's medical misinformation policy. TikTok seems to be prioritizing profit over the safety of its young user base by allowing companies to promote medication for a broad set of symptoms, such as being chatty. A January NBC report last month exposed TikTok for allowing Cerebral, a health startup, to sponsor ADHD advertisements that promoted negative body images and containing misleading health claims. According to NBC, the ads linked overeating and obesity with ADHD. The ad said obesity is 5 times more prevalent among adults with ADHD and stated that getting treatment for the medical health disorder could help patients stop overeating. The person featured in the advertisements was surrounded by junk food, blah, 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 blah. So this is bad, obviously. What's interesting is that this is not being covered by the Wall Street Journal, very notably, who, rest assured, if this was happening on Facebook, this would be the leading story in the Wall Street Journal today, because the Wall Street Journal is on an absolute rampage to cover any kind of smoke coming out of the Facebook camp. And time again, when we see troubling stuff like this coming out of TikTok, which is very, very regular, by the way, but it strangely never appears in the Wall Street Journal or the New York Times or the Washington Post. But kudos to Media Matters for America, MediaMatters.org, for revealing what we've known for a very long time. And here in this room, that TikTok, perhaps even more than Facebook, is guilty of a lot of what Facebook gets accused of, which is harming young children. Because, by the way, the kids aren't on Facebook.
Tyler?
Yes.
I wanted to just add to something, because there's been some conversations in the NFT space regarding marketing, which I found really fascinating. I found fascinating the fact that TikTok is the vernacular that people are using that I've really been present to is how, and I also did some research on my own, how TikTok's heavily pushing into Latin America. And they have this real mission to push into Latin America. And from a contextual, I don't know if Elle's on stage, but basically, when you start to look at pushing into a demographics where culturally the kids, I'll put it in a very kind way, but if David's on stage, he would know this as well. I don't think culturally a Latin parent would allow their child, and God rest Chris's soul, because I think Chris gets this as well, up there in the ethers, that basically a Latin parent...
Hang on. No, let's be clear. He's in the metaverse.
He's in the metaverse. Chris is in the metaverse.
RIP.
I get to see him someday. Basically...
With no water and a burner
Exactly,
phone.
exactly, and a burner phone, totally. That made me smile for sure.
Using a completely different phone for Clubhouse,
Exactly,
obviously.
totally. But it's super fascinating, because I think David on stage could probably speak to that, because he's a dad and he's of Hispanic descent as well. That I personally know from my experience in Latin America and the people I know, they do not allow their children to be on TikTok. And the parents themselves are not really on TikTok because they're busy doing stuff outside. And you know what I'm saying, Tyler, same thing in certain parts of Asia, you see the same. But what I find fascinating is the push to go into TikTok, the push to TikTok to go into Latin America. And that's what I find interesting, because it's almost like Chris used to say, it's digital opium. And I'm thinking to myself, why do you want to get so many of these young adults or whomever addicted to this app, only to in some ways make it a bit of a brain drain? I mean, some things, if you have responsibility and you have your own agency, sure. But I don't really feel that that's the best way. And I have a Swedish friend here in Holland who does not allow her daughter, who's 7 or 8 years old, to even go on TikTok more than like 3 minutes. Like, she times it. And she's very, very strict with her that she does not want her on TikTok. So
Sorry, I didn't hear how old the young girl was, but
7,
how
8
does
years
she?
old.
Oh, okay, so she could easily stop her from being on TikTok. Yeah,
Yeah, she can. Plus, also, it's but I agree with what Tyler's saying. Like, A, who's really on TikTok in terms of the age demographics? B, is it also being used as an extension to babysit? I think everyone who has a child that might be screaming and deserving attention, that sometimes we might not know any better. We just want to give the phone or the iPad. And it's unknown because it could be downloaded from the App Store. So I think kids are a lot sharper and smarter than we may give them credit for sometimes. But this is also why I believe it's about a mature conversation about what TikTok really is and what it can do and the harm that it could cause,
On that point,
to bring that forward.
so check this out.
If I could just address the meta point, which is that if we saw that we'd had an exploit through Facebook in 2013 with the Brexit, 13-14 with the Brexit, and then with the election, can we not understand that instead of using somebody else's platform, they create their own platform, and they have legislated in their own country to prevent children and to guard their young from spending too much time playing games, etc., which we regard as regressive. And at the same time, they've exported something which is even more powerful than all the previous versions of social media, which we know is going to affect the perceptions and the well-being of the children. And furthermore, they're going to undercut the existing players so that they bring the price down in order that they run them out of business anyway. This is just another masterstroke from the Chinese complex, I think.
I want to frame it properly, because we say children, right? But the majority is around like 13 to 21, or whatever the age range is that is under 24, right? And within that, you can't necessarily design a way for the kids to use social media, because, especially, well, I would say, at least from where I'm from and how I stand in this, it's knowing that this child is going to be there, and you need to let them know that the perception on the internet isn't reality. However, if you've grown up with that since you were 13 at least, then that technically is your reality, and you've built your social circles around these things. And what TikTok does better than any other thing, right, which is why it's the most powerful, is actually give you a community that gravitates towards your content. And then you're in the DMs, and then you're doing video chats, and you're doing all of these things that create a nice little circle and closed loop of continuing like conversation and context in whatever demographic you're in. And no other place does that. And you can't necessarily, and let's say one of my main topics of conversation in this, and I won't stray too far off, is knowing if you're a young LGBT person and you are in the middle of England, around nowhere, and no one is like you over there. And TikTok is your place where you see people like you and doing the things that you want to do as well. And that gives you confidence. And I've had so many people come from those places to London because that is exactly what it's like out there, because they're the oddball. So TikTok does a lot more that, as much as it tracks, it's at the same time the way that these kids frame it is totally different.
Okay, so hang on for a second. The next, Carl and Cheryl both DM'd me with a related headline that's happening right now. I'm at Carl. Did you send it to Cheryl, and then Cheryl also sent it? I just want to give you credit for finding this one, if so.
No, I read that earlier, this morning.
Okay, so Cheryl and Carl both found this one. Cheryl, you can pin it to the top of the room if you could. It says TikTok shares your data more than any other social media app, and it's unclear where it goes. Oh, gee, I wonder where it's going. Where's the data going?
It couldn't be going to China. It couldn't
No,
be.
come on.
Oh, God forbid.
Two of your social media apps could be collecting a lot of data on you, and you might not like what one of them is doing with it. That's according to a recent study published last month by a mobile marketing company called URL Genius, which found that TikTok and YouTube track users' personal data more than any other social media apps. The study found that YouTube, which is owned by Google, mostly collects your personal data for its own purposes, like tracking your online search history or even your location to serve you more relevant ads. But TikTok, which is owned by a Chinese tech giant called ByteDance, mostly allows third-party trackers to collect your data, and from there, it's hard to say what happens with it. With third-party trackers, it's essentially impossible to know who's tracking your data or what information they're collecting, from which posts you interact with and how long you spend on each one, to your personal location and any other personal information you may share with the app. As the study noted, third-party trackers can track your activity on other sites and even after you leave the app. To conduct the study, URL Genius used the Record App Activity feature from Apple's iOS to count how many different domains track a user's activity across 10 different social media apps: YouTube, TikTok, Twitter, Telegram, LinkedIn, and Instagram, Facebook, Snapchat, Messenger, and WhatsApp over the course of one visit. Before you even log into your account, YouTube and TikTok topped the other apps with 14 network contacts each, significantly higher than the study average of 6 per app. Those numbers are all probably higher for users who are logged into accounts on those apps. The study noted 10 of YouTube's trackers were first-party network contacts, meaning the platform was tracking user activity for its own purposes. 4 of the contacts were from third-party domains, meaning a social platform was allowing a handful of mystery outside parties to collect information and track user activity. For TikTok, the results were even more mysterious. 13 of the 14 network contracts on the popular social media app were from third parties. The third-party tracking still happened even when the users didn't opt into allowing tracking in each app setting. Quote,
Tyler, didn't we talk about that? Didn't we talk about the fact that the allow app to track or not allow to track doesn't work, or doesn't really work? It's just there to give people the sort of psychological security that they could actually say no to having their app tracked. And on the second point, unless you log out of the TikTok, Instagrams, or all those devices, they stay with you logged in even wherever you go with that phone. So if let's say you're in TikTok, unless you log out of TikTok, hey, ¿qué tal? Unless you log out of TikTok, you're still technically logged into the app. So the app could be actually on your phone. And I don't know anyone that even uses any of these apps that logs out of the app when they're not like scrolling or using it. So they kind of leave their Facebook logged in, they leave their TikTok logged in, they leave their Instagram logged in. I don't know if that's clear, but by them leaving it logged in, it still allows also, wouldn't the app be able to be tracked just by the geolocator of the actual iPhone?
Yes, it says TikTok has been the subject of criticism in the past over how the company collects and uses data, especially from younger users, including claims that the company has transferred some private user data to Chinese servers. As CNBC noted, TikTok's privacy policy states that the app can share user data with its Chinese parent company, which it claims to employ security measures to safeguard sensitive user data. Okay. So the next one, shall we, is Leaf Logistics, which uses AI to predict shipping disruptions, raises $37 million. The UK's CMA, Market Authority, designates Amazon as a grocery retailer, subject to the same rules followed by supermarket chains with strict regulations on vendor relations. That's interesting. And what else? Interviews with over a dozen rapid grocery delivery workers in India show they spent months healing after road accidents and had to pay their own medical bills. Okay. And those are, ID.me is back in the news, Nicholas. ID.me says it will make automated facial recognition verification optional for its government partners and let users delete their face scans starting on March 1st. And this is obviously for those who don't know, if you read that headline in isolation, you wouldn't know, but we know because we read these every day. That's part 3 in the ongoing drama of ID.me and the IRS, where we read a headline about 2 weeks ago that the IRS is now going to use ID.me to authenticate all of the users to the irs.gov website with facial recognition identity verification. Then there was a lot of blowback, as you might hope and expect. And there was. And the IRS took note and said, oh, okay, so we shouldn't do that. Scratch that. We're not doing that. Never mind. And that was the headline 2 days ago, was it not, Cheryl? Today's Wednesday. I think that was Monday's headline, was that the IRS.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's right.
And then today's headline is that ID.me says it will make automated facial recognition verification optional for its government partners. So they don't face that blowback. It's no longer a binary issue. There's a gradient. It's optional. You don't have to have it. And that could be their new response, was that it's optional. And it will let users delete their face scans starting March 1st. And we happen to have Nicholas Lyons, who joins us often in Clubhouse, but today via Twitter Spaces, who himself plays in this space professionally in far bigger ways than even the people in our social audio rooms even know. Only I myself learned recently just how grandiose Nicholas's project really is, and it really it's mind-blowing even for the people who don't know what he's doing. What he's doing is quite impressive, and but when you get into the details of what he's got cooked up, it almost borders on unbelievable. So, Nicholas, what's your take on ID.me's new position with regard to their facial recognition, identity verification, or anything else in that category?
Yeah, I find myself always going to, first of all, thanks very much for the flattering words, and hopefully seeing will be believing for delivering everything we're doing. But I think I'm becoming more and more aware that, or I'm hoping certainly that in talking and the audience and in thinking of the audience, they ask themselves those, key questions: is there a corporation involved? Is there a government involved? And, do I have any self-sovereignty? Do I have any control over the information that I share or where my information is stored? And what I know that we all are understanding, but nobody's feeling that there can be a solution where we could be able to do this for ourselves, because it sounds complicated and almost impossible to achieve. But I think the thing that is more and more evident, and the thing that we should be really paying attention to, like we were noting about how Thiel connects to Trump, connects to Zuckerberg, connects to Boardmove, etc., that there are very powerful players in this game, corporate and governments, in the same way we're talking about TikTok that links back to ByteDance, that leads back to a company that we have very little information about, is that these are real issues where the public at large, and that's not nation state, it's not being an American, it's being a human, requires that we have these, a global, ideally, declaration of digital independence, and that we start to value our digital consciousness, shall we say, as we merge, because that's what is happening, with technology. And so whether people call that a form of a singularity, but every single thing that we do in our world has a digital fingerprint, and it has an imprint that is reflective of you, and that has value. And all of the technocracy, I think it was Amy who was saying before about Apple and leaving your apps open, etc. There is a drain of every single thing that you do is going into some repository of information. And we as humans need to know that it obviously is more, we would be better served if we own that data. So in all of our, the projects that we're working on is to try to get people to understand that, whether it's our volumetric capture rigs that are helping people effectively take control of their avatar, and whether that avatar moves into one metaverse, there will be a multiverse, like there will be multi-chain, and there will be value represented in every domain. And the question is, does the government have to be involved in every value exchange? Do you have to prove your identity? And if you do, how do you do that? That's what's coming. So if we're aware of that, we just need to evolve as a group of people. And I think everyone who listens to this show, cares about this, is that we need to say, if we could do it, then if we could remove all those middlemen and all those people that are taxing us, then that could be a better society that goes over nation state and is human to human. That's what I think is the most important thing, that we can now recognize what's going on, and now we need to agitate for a right.
Okay. The next big topic, actually, we've gone through the big topic.
Hey, Tyler, can I pick up on that point? This is David on the Clubhouse side.
Give it one. Let's try and limit it to 60 seconds.
Tyler, your voice is a little bit going far.
Sorry, David. Can you hear me?
Yeah. I'll do it. I'll do it in 60. It's just simply the value prop, and the point that you're making is part of the biggest issues of our day in tech. The challenge is going to be dealing with today's power brokers, and how do we transition to a broadly deployed commercialized solution. So that's the challenge. And what Apple did with regards to locking up some of the ability of Facebook and some of the apps to just kind of blindly pull all this data, that's a step in that direction. But we will need a dramatic effort with those big social networks that is going to have to require legislation, quite frankly, because they're not just going to do quote unquote the right thing. So in addition to the innovation,
remember, you can't legislate
we have other things we need to
because
set
all
forth.
of the legislation is written by those corporations.
I understand that, but there's a vast there are multiple chasms, that stand between us and a dramatic commercialization of the solutions you're talking about, which we need. I'm saying I'm advocate for just kind of a rationalization of all of this. We're all on the same page, but we do. You're
I agree
right.
with you. Just to reflect on that, just in conversation, and not interrupting you. Those are the things that we're not really talking about, that we are going to do some dramatic things that are going to really shift. And because we're going to do them in a way that is novel, that says the public can now participate, and this includes physical spaces. So if anyone's anywhere near Centre Point in London, they will have seen a building that is 50,000 square feet of digital space with public space, private space, pro bono music, recording studios. There's going to be something happening. It's just that we're not able to, until we're finished and people can see that it's possible, it will be impossible. Like Nelson Mandela said, it's always impossible until it's done. And it's very difficult building for the far future because no one believes in you. But as you get closer, you start to realize that, okay, you may as well wait to reveal exactly what you're saying, something mimetically powerful enough to say, okay, there's a new thing happening and that we can all participate, but it has to be, cheaper, faster, better. And it has to have a very good, simple UX, UI, and it has to enable people to, using the tech parlance, grok what's going on, for the light bulb to go on to say, okay, this time we're not going to miss out. We know this is what they're doing in Web 2. Where's the future? And we want our share. And that's, it is happening. The DAO movement, all of this is about learning. How do we govern ourselves? How do we come to consensus? What is consensus? What is time, even, in terms of consensus? These are very big issues. I always talk about the kissing point between finance and physics. That's where we are. That's what is necessary at this point in our evolution. Sorry to interrupt you.
Not worries. So we're not going to get into the tweets like this one that from our friend Manaz, who works in the medical space, that an Israeli startup's plant-based treatment stops COVID and Omicron symptoms, according to the Jerusalem Post. Israeli startup's plant-based treatment stops COVID. The new plant-based treatment by Israeli startup called Novel Concept stopped the COVID-19 virus's progress in human cells and helped patients recover. And the next is from Rachel Young from Switzerland, that nerve stimulation device helps paralyzed patients walk, cycle, and swim. 3 paralyzed patients could walk, cycle, and swim using a nerve stimulation device controlled by a touchscreen tablet. And of course, there's a potential brain-computer interface. Well, that is body-computer interface happening if you're controlling it through a tablet, obviously. But that has metaverse implications as well, because the sense of moving, for example, could be very useful in the metaverse. It could be digitized, so to speak. That might be an interesting opportunity for Robert Scoble to jump in on, as we often talk about what comes after the metaverse. It seems that Elon is already saying that we need to look beyond this metaverse and start looking at the BCI era that will inevitably follow with brain-computer interfaces and the really interesting innovations that have been already, some of the studies that we've seen about controlling robotic arms remotely at a distance, even with bidirectional, with touch sensors on the fingertips, which means the parts of the brain that are responsible for receiving the sense of touch are starting to be clearly mapped out so that people can lift delicate objects without breaking them remotely, which essentially is a baby step towards doing that in the metaverse, where you can feel actual objects in the metaverse. That's the interesting implications there, which this headline kind of leads to. So thank you for that one, Rachel. And I believe Jonathan, good to see you back, Jonathan, on the Twitter space stage, sent this one about the Fed designs digital dollar that handles 1.7 million transactions per second, right, Jonathan? As the race against China's development of its central bank digital currency, the CBDC, known as the digital yuan, continues, the U.S. Federal Reserve accompanied a feat of testing a design for a U.S. digital dollar that in one of 2 tests managed to handle 1.7 million transactions per second. I guess the interesting question to ask would be, how many transactions per second does Visa or MasterCard handle? Would be worth knowing. Or Bank of America, for that matter, with their credit cards or whatever. A report released on last Thursday provided the initial findings of research conducted as a collaboration between the Boston Fed and the MIT, which we read about on Monday, I recall. It was called Project Hamilton. The report describes a theoretical high-performance and resilient transaction processor for the CBDC, for a US dollar, that was developed using open-source research software called OpenCBDC. According to the Fed's report, a core processing engine for a hypothetical general process CBDC was created that produced one code base capable of handling 1.7 million transactions per second. According to the Fed, the vast majority of transactions reached settlement finality in under 2 seconds, which sounds pretty fast to me, I gotta say. Quote, it is critical to understand how emerging technologies could support a CBDC and what challenges remain, said Boston Federal Executive Vice President. Quote, this collaboration between MIT and our technologists have created a scalable CBDC research model that allows us to learn more about these technologies and the choices that should be considered when designing a CBDC. The Fed revealed the design of the CBDC transaction processor was also released on GitHub. According to the Boston Fed, the second phase of the Project Hamilton will demonstrate how open CBDC will build upon the initial model to allow flexibility in design that will incorporate how policymakers will implement an actual CBDC. Quote, there is still many remaining challenges in determining whether or how to adopt a central bank payment system for the United States, says the director of this digital currency initiative at MIT. Quote, what is clear is that open source software provides an important way to collaborate, experiment, and implement. In addition to supporting collaboration, monetary systems benefit from transparency and verifiability, which open source offers. Well, so do blockchains, by the way. But there we are. The baby steps towards the digital dollar right there via Open CBDC in partnership with MIT and the Boston Fed, called Project Hamilton.
597 million transactions per day for Visa network.
Thank you. Who was that? Fred?
This is Fred.
Thank you, sir. Well done. 500 million, did you say?
But they're not. But they don't come to finality in that day. That's an important distinction to understand. Mm-hmm. There's still a reconciliation process behind that, which is what Visa basically gets paid for.
Right. I'm just trying to get a sense of,
On the CBDC front, though, I mean, the government is doing a very good job, or the governments of the world are doing a good job in tracking what's really going on in digital currencies and digital assets, etc. And they need to, because that's when more things become more digital. Their tax base migrates from the physical world to the digital world, and they need to track that, which is why money becomes the trapping point, because money requires identity, as we know, in order to justify KYC, AML, ML, TF, which is terrorist financing. And that is coordinated by the Financial Action Task Force, of which the Chinese are members. And I really think that it's ironic the way that they are being led around by the nose, because the digital yuan is so far ahead of them, and it's clear that they will follow whatever path that is, or the experimentation that is set from the decentralized world, because they've just come out and talked about stablecoins as well. And there are many questions that are therefore going to be asked. But I think that it's most likely that the reason for the central bank digital currency will be because there will be so much support needed to be given to the general population, and that social benefit, shall we say, will come from a central bank account, and that will actually challenge the traditional banking system if the Fed effectively, or the government, goes into running bank accounts, central bank accounts with its citizens. So it's very interesting what's happening.
All right. Next one is from The Economist. I think it was Demolaire just sent this one in, that Netflix once again dominates Oscar nominations. The streaming giant Netflix led the field this year with The Power of the Dog. So we just had the Oscar nominations were just announced, and Apple notably has a nomination for Best Picture with Apple TV Plus called Coda was the name of the title.
You covered that at the beginning, right?
I know we did. Look, the room tripled in size since we mentioned that. So we're at 350-ish in Clubhouse, and I have no clue how many in Twitter Space. It appears to be about 100. And so for those who have joined us late today, that's fine. You can do that. But we meet every day, every weekday at least, and we are a multi-platform gathering of geeks in Clubhouse and on Twitter Spaces, and you can be on stage in either. Everyone's welcome to grab the mic, and everyone in both apps will hear your beautiful voice and your genius insights, and the people who watch the live streams as well, of which there's many who do that, and the podcasts and all that, yada yada yada. Now, the first story that we covered, one of the first, was, as Ken just mentioned, the Apple got this nominations, 6 nominations total this year for Oscar nods, and Netflix apparently beat them out.
Well, yeah, but the key point, Tyler, on this is that Netflix is always getting a lot of nominations. Is that Apple? This is the first time Apple got nominated for Best Picture. Okay,
right.
So that was kind of like a big deal. But the other thing I mentioned when we covered it earlier is both Paramount and Sony, traditional studios, didn't get any nominations, and Amazon also got some nominations, I think. So that kind of shows you like the changing landscape from the traditional studios to these new streaming platforms. So I mean that's kind of what we covered. I should also mention, because on the subject, if anyone is interested, Disney's reporting their earnings after the close today. And so anyway, I'm done with that. Thanks.
Yeah, indeed.
Tyler, may I make a connection to that Apple story that I was trying to, but I wasn't really connected to the cross device. The importance of content as we're moving into the AR VR sort of proliferation, and with the new announcement, hopefully, in the fall of 22, with a release in 2023. There's been rumors that Apple's really focusing on their media content, music, video, And the video aspect is very important as we're starting to see a lot of companies really focus on IP and content. And we're going to start to see the term content is king really take over once again as we move into this whole new era of spatial computing and media, 3D media, spatial media. And this sort of ties into this leak that was sort of found within the App Store logs. Very brilliant developer was able to spot this Reality OS simulator code, a line of code relating to that. And so that's like sort of like the first official leak of, a connection to the Reality operating system that's going to live in the AR VR headsets. And so, we're getting close to March 8th. They're probably not going to announce on March 8th. It's most likely going to be in the actual WWDC that they'll announce the software. That's my hunch, because they normally do software during that event, and then during the fall they obviously present the actual product. But the leaks so far have been quite timely. Prior to this week, we saw a leak with regards to the WebXR API that would be connected with your iPhone and your AR VR device. So now we have sort of two leaks under the hood within the code. So this is getting very, very interesting and very hot. So I just wanted to quickly share those two things.
Yeah, thank you. So the next one is from Thomas Tong, that SpaceX loses 40 satellites to geomagnetic storm one day after their launch. A powerful magnetic storm took out most of a batch of Starlink satellites the day after they launched. And they usually launch somewhere in the neighborhood of 50 or 60 per launch. And so 40 got fried due to geomagnetic storms, according to the BBC. And the next one is...
Just to mention, I don't know for certain, but I'm pretty sure those are the version 2 satellites as well. So a special kick in the balls, unfortunately, for the team.
Yeah. But I mean,
how much are they each?
Somebody can dig that up, hopefully.
I don't know personally myself, but I know these were the ones that were designed to double the bandwidth, because obviously there was an upper limit on the bandwidth of the version 1s.
Right. Well, they're now offering a new enterprise pricing for a higher bandwidth as well. There's a new...
They are indeed, yeah, $500 a month or something. It's not really meant for individuals. It's meant for like small villages and hamlets and towns and stuff to share. But yeah, it's quite expensive.
Yeah. So the next one is from the Wall Street Journal, and several people sent this one in recently because it just came out, that pro-China Twitter accounts are flooding Twitter with a particular hashtag. And this hashtag was previously critical of Beijing Winter Olympics. Researchers say many accounts are largely automated and are meant to drown out calls by advocacy groups to boycott the Beijing Games. The pro-China accounts have been flooding Twitter with messages that include the hashtag genocide games, in what researchers say is an effort to dilute the hashtag's power to galvanize criticism of the Winter Olympics host nation of China. Human rights advocates and Western lawmakers have used the genocide games hashtag to raise awareness about Xinjiang, a region in northwest China, blah, 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 blah. And so magically, what do you know? There's a whole lot of bot accounts saying a whole lot of very positive things using the hashtag genocide games. I would love to see it. I'm sure there's at least a few humorous examples of how that hashtag is being used by some bot accounts, which are no doubt coming from Norway. Absolutely. This smells of Norwegian global politics as usual. So the next one is from Ted Abramson from The Guardian. In the UK, the headline says, US Postal Service is under fire for their plan to spend more than $11 billion on gas-powered fleets of mail trucks, gas-powered mail trucks. Critics say this move will upend the Biden administration's goal to get to net zero emissions by 2050 as a means to tackle climate crisis. Right. Why is the U.S. Postal Service spending their $11 billion vehicle budget on gas engines in an age when we should clearly be switching over to more climate-friendly vehicles. Yes?
You can just confirm that's 11 billion with a B,
Yes.
not million with an M.
With a B. Now,
Holy crap.
My other question is, why not go ahead and do autonomous vehicles while you're at it, or vehicles that could be upgraded to be autonomous? But more importantly, why not then add your own? Because, by the way, these vehicles do regular kind of grid-like driving in very predefined grids, and they could map those grids day after day after day very effectively. That data would be very valuable, and a separate set of data from the same cameras could also be valuable. You could have the US Postal Service could create a daily updated street view of nearly every street in America, which also could be potentially valuable. They have interesting assets that they have yet to monetize with the fact that they're driving down every street in America every day.
The US Postal Service is the most undervalued asset in the world in our estimation. We've been interested in it since 2014-15. It has about 700,000 workers, the largest fleet of vehicles, and it exists to be the emergency service, which it proved to be, which is the logistics backbone of the US with, I think, 125 million addresses. So it's also the decentralized distributed node base. And at the end of the node goes back to our Greek ancestors, oikos and nomos, which is economics, which is household accounts, oikos being house and nomos being accounts. So it really is the backbone, in our opinion, of the decentralized opportunity. And there are still in 2021 some 150 billion items delivered, all subsidized by junk mail, which costs 27 million trees a year that are not saplings but are mature trees that are acting as a carbon sink. So resolving the US Postal Service was one of the projects that we were most passionate about. And it's of course owned by the people because you own your mailbox. And as such, you have to do one special thing in order to opt out of receiving wasteful paper mail. And that is you have to prove your address because you cannot turn it off unless you can prove your address. So there is a pathway for people-powered technology to emerge. And in fact, we've been at the base point of some intellectual property, which is our plan to mutualize with the general public, which would serve as a Section 8 constitutional property right for people to use free open source software in combination with a small device that can go to every household in the world at less than $1. So there are, I think it was David's point, or maybe it was Evan's, there are plans to be able to do this with the wider world, and the USPS is something that is, the people own. You own your mailbox; it's on your property.
Nicholas, that's not always true anymore, by the way. Nicholas, in newer communities, you don't own your mailboxes anymore because of all the cost problems they have. In newer communities, they're building like these community like mailbox hubs that actually belong to like a communal, so everyone doesn't own their mailbox anymore. So a lot of times the post office is delivering to like a hub in newer built communities. But I'd also at another point,
there is a human at the end of the node. And there is infrastructure, which is the entire infrastructure of the USPS, which is a potentially people-powered network that we can utilize because it is a direct messaging format with a time stamp. That's what attracted us in the beginning with the comprehension.
I'm just saying,
that the franking
people
and the stamping
traditionally have owned
is
the mailbox, but not
similar
anymore.
to a chain.
I only made one point, that not all of that, which is that basically where historically everybody owned their own mailbox and they delivered to your mailbox and you own the mailbox. In newer communities, that's not true anymore. And the other thing, because you're so interested in the post office, I'm curious how you're going to solve the fact that they continue to hemorrhage money because of their pension costs. Because the biggest issue with the post office is their pension obligations. But that's a whole other issue. Okay.
Exactly. No, 100% agreed. The pension, they have a unique liability that was put upon them by I think it was the Bush administration, first Bush administration, which was for political expediency. No other company or federal agency is subjected to this, but it has proven itself at the last election. And furthermore, there is a mandate for everyday direct mail. So there's a lot of political will that will care about it. Plus, it has a postal banking system which is underutilized, that is again served by a node network of postal services, and friendly postal people that have a relationship with their community. So it's a very good opportunity, and we the people should not ignore it. In every major developed nation, this is the case in all of Europe as well. So I think it's it's better than Google and Facebook, and that's something that we can leverage as humans.
Okay, so I want to Ken, Carl, go ahead.
I'll be very, very quick in answer to your question of why would the Postal Service be making this decision? I think it's worth mentioning that I believe that the Postmaster General is still the jury, who was the same Republican who was put in power, the executive, by Donald Trump, and was the one who was accused of attempting to slow down the mail deliveries during the elections, 2020 elections. So could be argued, if you wish to do so, that he has a vested interest in making Biden look like a bell end, while Biden is trying to desperately embrace everything green and electric and et cetera, et cetera. He also has a number of financial investments in subcontractors that still do business with the Postal Service that could be, affecting his decision-making process in this.
Okay.
I think you should be aware that the Postal Service has been trialing electric vehicles. I just don't think that they were ready for the workload that delivering 153 billion pieces requires.
Okay, so we got to blast through these because we're going to hand it over to Messi, who's going to do Tech News Africa here in a second. The first is from Alexandra, who shares this one that asks, have you heard of Q-commerce? The desire for near instant delivery has spurred the emergence of Q-commerce, which is short for quick commerce, a new, faster form of delivery. It has a new name called quick commerce. That's like the 10, 15-minute instant delivery in most big major cities, in fact, globally at this point. The next was JT's shares about Apple source code references to Reality OS for potential VR, AR Apple headsets. People are finding the Reality OS buried in the code there. Very cool. And then the next one is from Katerina that DARPA has just flown a Black Hawk helicopter with nobody in it. The agency completed a 30-minute autonomous test flight over Fort Campbell, Kentucky. Autonomous Black Hawk helicopters, everybody. The next is also from Katerina that alcohol use is linked to lower connectivity in brain areas that process emotions. Summary of the study says that heavy drinkers and those at risk of alcohol use disorder show reduced communication between brain areas associated with social and emotional processing. And last but not least, from Neuroscience News, fecal implants drive behavioral and cognitive changes in Alzheimer's, modulating the gut's microbiome by fecal implants induced behavioral and cognitive changes in mouse models of Alzheimer's disease, researchers say. We found that modulating the gut biome by fecal implants in germ-free mice induces behavioral and cognitive changes in an Alzheimer's disease model, said senior author Jacob Faber, PhD, professor of behavioral neuroscience at the OHSU School of Medicine, which is where exactly, Katerina? Where is OHSU? To the best of my knowledge, no one has shown that before in an Alzheimer's disease model. The work follows a previous OHSU study in mice published last year that reveals a correlation between the composition of gut microbiome and the behavioral and cognitive performance of mice carrying genes associated with Alzheimer's. In the new study, researchers carefully manipulated the digestive tract of mice using fecal implants. Yes, very carefully. They found changes in measures of behavior and cognition among 3 different genotypes and between males and females. 2 of the genotypes involved mirror The, the two of the genotypes involved mirror those associated with the predisposition to Alzheimer's in people. Researchers found that changes in the gut microbiome clearly affected behavioral and cognitive changes measured in mice. A study suggests possible avenues for forestalling dementia through targeted use of probiotics or fecal transplants, which already have been used to manipulate the gut microbiome in people. However, Raber said much more research needs to be conducted to ascertain the mechanism of these behavioral and cognitive effects, because the relationship between these effects and gut microbiome is influenced by genotype and sex. Quote, people can buy, hold on, last thought. Here's the quote. People can buy probiotics over the counter, but we want to make sure the right treatment is being used for each patient and that it actually benefits them. Raber said, quote, the gut microbiome is a complex environment. If you change one element, you'll also change the other elements. So you want to make sure to select a probiotic that promotes brain health and brain function for each patient while limiting any negative side effects. Go ahead.
So I am actually up in and being part of a trial up in Stanford that is currently a manuscript is underway, assessing and reporting on this phenomenon. But yeah, I took a pill that had inside of it a device that sampled.
Hold on. How did you take that pill?
Well, this is the new intellectual property, but basically it's just a normal sized pill, like outer sugar coated pill, and inside is a device that when you take it, it samples your gut and your microbiome live, because most of the sampling has to be taken from what they call the brown matter rather than from the live matter of the microbiome. And the professor who's working on this was part of the Genome Project previously, and was the professor, and I think founding professor of genomics at Harvard, but was originally at MIT and Stanford. And he and this research, which is under peer review, and some of us went up, just as friends. He just said, "Oh, would you do the test?" And my wife and I went to his house just with our kids, and we did this test, and it samples the biome, and you get this unbelievable information. And he said to me that the work on the microbiome is going to dwarf anything that we knew about the body and the genome, and he believes it to be the medicine cabinet of our entire sort of entirety of humanity, and that you will be able to fix most of the ailments that we suffer. And there are a lot of these connections that are going to be as, if not more, revelatory than DNA. And this will be published, I think, in the not too distant future. So it's very exciting. There's really amazing things happening.
Okay, I got two more that I got to share before we hand it off to Messi here. The first is from BB from the South China Morning Post, that a Avengers VFX maker digital domain, a visual effects company called Digital Domain, wants its virtual humans to be the foundation of the metaverse. Hong Kong listed Digital Domain, known for its hologram of singer Teresa Teng, is betting on virtual humans to gain a foothold in the metaverse. And they make incredibly lifelike avatars, essentially. And then the next is also from BB, from Reuters, that European and U.S. regulators tell banks to prepare for Russian cyber attack threat. The standoff between Russia and Ukraine has rattled European politicians and political leaders who fear an invasion that would inflict damage on the entire region. And now the European Central Bank is preparing banks for a possible Russian-sponsored cyber attack as tensions with Ukraine mount, two people with knowledge said, which I think you'll agree, I've been warning for many months that if there is going to be hot conflict, the precursor to that hot conflict would be, I said so, did I not, cyber attacks on key infrastructure like water, energy, and food, and financial as well. I think
Tyler,
yes. And I go ahead.
Just aligned with what you're saying, there's no coincidence. I had a lovely chat today with a particular person here in Holland that said exactly the same thing, and they work in cybersecurity for air and government and finance. So yes, they actually said they were ramping up. They're a cybersecurity specialist, and they said they are ramping up, and it's been ramping up for a while. And they were talking about the geopolitical situation. So Holland, maybe the EU is doing what they do, but Netherlands is very, very much on top of it because they clearly. I mean, and of course, Tyler, they're also where ASML is. So I'm just saying,
Yep.
it's very interesting.
Okay. So
Can I add something here?
go ahead, Piotr.
Thanks, Tyler. Yeah, so I mean, look, we talk about the situation between Russia and Ukraine, and we say that an imminent conflict is on the horizon, but the two have been at war since 2014, if you think about it, because the Russians have conducted minor scale cybersecurity attacks since then. It's the Indo-Ukrainian like indirect war, basically. And the attack by the Belarusian independent group was just that, just a sort of a symbolic attack, but not actually meaning anything. They attack government websites which look important, but actually don't receive very big traffic next to things like social media. So the Ukrainians are quite well prepared for a cyber attack by the Russians. They developed a ministry of what's it called? We discussed it yesterday. Ministry of Disinformation, which was launched in 2020. So they've been working closely with the EU and others to mitigate this. So there's some degree of optimism that the Ukrainian infrastructure is strong enough to withstand malicious attacks. We don't know fully what the Russians are capable of, but it's I would I would just make sure to be wary of what the Ukrainians have in terms of deterrence and defense as much as what the Russians are capable in terms of offensive capabilities. But that's all. Thanks.
Sure.
Yeah, can I just add one other thing? The warnings are not because there's going to be a direct attack on any of those companies or countries. It's because if they did launch something like NotPetya, which then bled out into the rest of the world and caused, I think that's what took down the Maersk line for a while. So all these warnings have been coming out for weeks. I think you've raised them for weeks, Tyler, but they've been, coming out just to be ready if something comes across and also to keep people informed. So it's not anything secret or new.
Okay, so the last thought, because Messi, go ahead and get your Tech News Africa room ready. We have it pinned to the top of the clubhouse room. And the last article today is from the Telegraph. Thank you to whoever shared it. That heart attack risk increases 63% post-COVID, says major American study. The authors warn governments should prepare for a surge of cardiovascular disease, but experts believe vaccines could reduce the risk. COVID survivors are 63% more likely to suffer a heart attack, according to the first comprehensive assessment of cardiovascular complications within a year of recovering from the virus. In a study in Nature Medicine, researchers in America found that the rate of conditions such as heart failure, coronary disease, and strokes was noticeably higher amongst those who had been infected with COVID-19 compared to those who had not, even after a mild case. Ouch. Food for thought, and we will see you again tomorrow. Thank you, everybody, for joining us.
Thank you.
I'll see you tomorrow.
Messi,
You guys